ta tí qua xì sơ đi một sản đó tí qua họ đó bà qua để họ đó ta đó tí qua thế đó mà cái là ta là với bà cái nhau này bà cái máu đó ta còn là bà đó là foreign about politics này bà ta là bà ta là bà máu đó là phát đồ bà thon mấy cái thế nào cũng khó mà tí qua nàyเอาไว้ในเกมตัดเตะสปอร์ตคาร์บ้าขันถ้าเป็นเราชนะเลยพอเป็นมาตั้งที่ตั้งตัวเนาะคุณแม่เราว่าขันทีวีโกกันดีกว่าอันเป็นเลยว่าเลยชิ้นอะไรไม่ยังไงเอาไว้เกมปั๊มเลยเป็นการเกสิโกว่าพอเราพลาดด้วยกันเลยเอาไว้ international ก็ต่อเราเกสิว่าเราดีอะไรสิ่งที่พี่เราลาเลยด้วยเต็มอย่างที่ผู้ว่าคือไม่น่าเลยคือผู้อย่างนั้นเลยชั่วโมงนี้ได้เท่าไหร่เอาไว้ได้อยู่บุญที่เราดีกว่าအခုနေတော့ဘက်ကလည်းချီလူအဝဲတွေလွတ်တာဒီလိုချီလူကွက်တဲ့ထဲလို့လူတော့ကဲဘက်ကလည်းတမ်းမှာတော့ချောရတာကိတာကိုလည်းပေါ်ခဲတော့ဘာလဲပြပိုင်ဝဲလွတ်တာဒီတော့ကြည့်တာလည်းမှာဒါတော့သူတာဒီပါမောနေဒီကွက်တဲ့တော့ဒီမြစ်လည်းကနခါပါဝါရတယ်ခင်းနေမိုင်ဟိုတော့ဒီမြစ်ဒီကွက်တော့ဒီကွက်တော့ကျူတော့သူကျူဘာကလေးဒီမိုင်အင်းဘာလို့တော့သူဒီကွက်တော့ကတဲ့ကွက်ချင်းတဲ့ကွက်ချင်းဒီလာတဲ့မှာတော့မြစ်တမလာပမာဏတော့သူကတော့ဒီကနာလူတော့ကြော်ရတယ်အမှန်တော့မင်းစီကွာရင်းမင်းတေရထော်ရင်းနဲ့ကွာယူတေတမခေါ်ထိတယ်ရပါဘောနဲ့ထော်ခါတယ်ပမစီကွာလည်းအမွေမကွာလည်းမကွာရတော့တက်ခွက်ရရဆိုတော့ဒီကတော့ဒီချုံမနဲ့ကြီးမှတယ်တော်ရည်တော့အခုနေတော့အဝေဒဒီကစာရစီကွာအောင်လို့တော့သူကစီကနာလို့တော့ဒီမဲ့တော့စီကွာလာတယ်ဒီကတော့ဒီတော့ပါတယ်ဒီမှာကွာတယ်တော့တက်ခွက်ရရတော့Kalau lo open discussion, kalau round table, tak test kalau ada code lah, wah ready mah. Tadi ni kita pas sema arah kajian tu pun, kalau pemata ada terkait le, oh kami bulan pemata le mana nyala, kalau macam awak wala ni lah, awak jiwa lo masih ada di sini kalau mana bulan le, ada pemata kisah lo, kita pun masih ada nyala. Kau ni dah. Bruce, right now we're going to start. And first, we would like to introduce yourself to. Introduce yourself first.
Well, I have a conflict of interest in introducing myself, and so I need to warn the audience nothing is said under oath. But I've been working in Washington for almost 50 years. I graduated from Harvard Law School. Secretary of the Supreme Court, Deputy Attorney General of the Justice Department, served on the Iran-Contra Committee. I practice constitutional and international law. I've helped like 25 countries rewrite their constitutions, which is oftentimes a very challenging task. I have a 100-book reading list. I'm more a philosopher and a teacher than a lawyer, just for my enthusiasms. But I've been in Washington and here regularly. My offices are near congressional buildings in the U.S. Supreme Court, so I'm able to witness firsthand the probability that the members are sociopaths as I see them every day. But I think I have long experience in trying to deal in the political world that's different than most people are accustomed to, because logic and reason oftentimes doesn't prevail there. There are all sorts of ulterior motives that you or I cannot perceive. And I'm here to try to help Corinne navigate through this Scylla and Charybdis, steer your way into independence that doesn't degenerate like so many other countries in Asia into tyrannies, but keeps the liberty and freedom that generated the incentive for independence in the first instance.
Cái đó tê ra khá là vì cái tên này là quay quay chiều là lịch sử đi qua rồi nó không phải là về mình tên là được rồi là phát được rồi hồi rồi ở cái đó tê ra là về tê ra đi tại cái con nó tê ra bỏ nó về tê ra là về mặt tê ra chỉ qua được chỉ về đi nó khá là đắt rồi ra chỉ tạm về sạch quốc tế là qua đi khá là được mà như vậy là mà tạm ở đây là mà như là về mà ra là White House này như vậy là như vậy chỉ mà nó về tê ra đi khá là cái vấn đề quan là nơi cái là cái quan là ông nói là ta thì đã bảo đó thôi đó ta mà nếu ta lại học rồi lúc đó chút rồi mà tôi chẳng có đó cái cái này thì là chút rồi ông nói cứ giải thích là ông nói cái quan là cái nghĩa là cái này thì là ông nói là chúng tôi sẽ đi qua cái đó so Bruce I know you have worked together with the Korea for a while, and as your experience, so what is the difficulty part and what's the challenge? So what is the challenge?
The greatest challenge in dealing with the Karen issue is unity. What repeatedly occurs is in attempting to speak with one voice, there are often divisions. And it makes it very difficult in making the case in Washington or elsewhere for independence when there are different Karen groups having different motives and objectives. Because the audience needs to recognize that for most of Washington, D.C., they hardly even know that Ka'athuli exists. And so you need to educate them, and when they hear the Tower of Babel rather than one voice, as I said, E pluribus unum, they say, well, listen, come back to me once you have one unified voice. And that's why I repeatedly stated ad nauseum, if we don't hang together, we hang separately. And that's really something that I can advise, but you have to deal with those problems. I don't really know why there are ulterior motives resisting independence. 76 years is a long time to prove the futility of thinking you're going to get freedom and liberty with the master race vermins in control. It's never had any kind of democratic governance ever over centuries. This is not just a new phenomenon. And there continues to be resistance, however. Maybe they fear they'll lose power, in a true democratic dispensation. They won't win elections and things of that sort. But the one thing that I would stress more than anything else, and is the road to success, is a unified voice that I can go and others can go to Congress, to the United Nations, and say, 99% of the Karen, they all want independence. There's no dissent. And that's actually greater unity than in the United States when we declared our revolution against Great Britain. There was dissent as well, but the majority was in favor and were willing to struggle for independence. And that is, I clearly sorry to the leaders of the Karen have got to resolve this issue.
When I do the Patoya or the Tenga, the Rabo, the Target, the Nipway, Target for the Bapachame, Doctor, and Takuta for the Clala, or there was a people who could do Bakana Washington, in a couple of in our matter. When you know our Italy and Napo, the Lord of your so I do the Rabo, I'm like a preaching in the Lord party, but the Tatumaka. Not the Tachi to carry Takonake or Aga, Tachi Army, or Tamu Army, or Mutai for Adona, Yuta Dama for your lab. So,
if I could just add one point, Czar, I am convinced that if Savoi Eugene had not been assassinated, Ka'athuli would be independent today, because his statesmanship was a galvanizing force for unity. We need another Savoi Eugene or reasonable facsimile, and I think the same goal can be accomplished.
According to what they're about, you're talking about, according to the Tachumo Sawa Jimmy, the theory to carry what I cheated to call the Bedima. I would have checked out Kerry, the Lua Rapper, and the Tokuma Miller, Mata de Sawa, Jibo Sama, Papo, or Canada, the Letu, the Father. So, Bruce, I know you have been working on many cases, and there is any example of the similarity case as a Karen? Have you ever seen or not?
Yes, and this is where I think that it's a source of inspiration, I believe, but it's not a guarantee. If we think of developments really in modern times, there are perhaps 24 or more instances where nations emerge from prior sovereigns. The most recent was in South Sudan, had an independence referendum in 2011, seceded from Sudan. Prior to that, perhaps the closest example was East Timor, seceded with the help of the United Nations and Australia from Indonesia in 1999. And then there are other instances that we can think of. Remember, we have Yugoslavia divided into 5 or 6 countries: Croatia, Slovakia, Bosnia, Macedonia. Kosovo at present is another country that has effectively seceded. The Soviet republics have seceded, creating 17 new nations. Anyway, these are not novelties, so the idea that a country can emerge from another sovereign is not shocking. Bangladesh emerged from Pakistan in 1971, another example. But they're not guaranteed. Sometimes, the political constellation of forces helped assist the emergence of independence. I believe, however, that what is positive for the current aspiration is certainly the consensus in the West that China is the big threat to world order and rule of law as opposed to authoritarian governments, and that Khatuli clearly would be an asset to the West in attempting to contain China, because it won't be a Chinese satellite. Its religion is different than the Chinese Communist Party. It's strategically located near the Straits of Malacca. It's got economic assets, and would be really the very, very first ASEAN nation that's not a satellite of China. So that's an incentive for the West and the United States, at least, to work with the Karen to establish independence. There's no love lost over the Burmese government and dictatorship that's subject to vast sanctions. But again, you have to have a unified voice that's positive. When you see 3 or 4 different voices, I'll tell you to say, listen, come back when we just want to listen to one person.
Poporo teodala kama dalahi wana ni yesi awe masoda tikoni kisi do yebe kota do ta kisi yebe ne apa kulo ba kiti te be me ya baba te pa dio no but ne ba di do ta pa puno ko ni poporo ke ku ni power mo me do ko kisi yebe la ma te o te ni le ya ko no ta le ni le ya
where I love my joy when it will have managed to be value from what he called it and all in the away or short letter he called with away my joy about the tap for a tablet face a coffee on
maybe where did that part no one to please that's lot of open us all good at Poporo when they were like a man about me. Loba kalau tak kita minum mau di mana?
Kalau dah pelari lagi, dia buka lah. Kamu ada bawa kelut pelakor.
Bawa kelut pelakor lah. Aku ni tu pernah dia ini kau. Nah di lagi mah. Ye hebat di nom doa hebat blow di nom. Kau tak ada yang pasal pelasinya tak sikwa ni kan? Tak sikwa tak sunya. Aku ni pasal kulo dah. Ye ni cerita letak we ni, mesti kau dah kau roban ni hebat. Tapi dia tak sulah, awak paham aku tak ada. Kalau kau dikoleh, orang dah padu cium tak ada. Tak ada kalau awak gua ni, tak suruh tak ada. Akhirnya dia cerita gila, kau tu lagi mana?
Yeah, tak. So she not really asked a question. She expressed that she's happy that you are with us and you are walking with us. But di mana mau? Hey, udah dulu aku nak dia friend mau. Ada tu kuala.
Tapi kuala dia, tapi kuala mau jual je no, boleh kau main.
Boleh lah.
Tapi loh, tinggal dah di penambah punah padu dah, lembah kalau tersak tatu tampil tidak pun dah ada kiban dah. Lalu tersak tatu kiban tu kiban ni, buat pemimpin yang putih baik dah pemimpin kena dah. Hasil cukup banyak pun dah, kerja lebih dah kata. Dapat masa ke peti pokok ke ulat tak sakit mana. Kata kira ami pun dah, dapat kerja ke kata pemacu ke pokok ke, ke pokok ke, dapat macam pun ni tatu le, aku mak tu ulat tak kerja le tu lepas peti pokok pun kemak ni tak kibar ke wad ni tidak pokok ni tatu ujian. Kah, tapi di tiwan ni, tiwan lebih kira kalau punya wala ke wad ni dapat apa tu lebih dapat cikgu nanti asal oli, dapat dua kali cikgu datang oli, dapat lebih lulat tu dulu tak setala, berkelompok, atas itu teso, dapat kalender beli ni lihat cikgu mana oli, dapat berdua pas cikgu oli, bertemu tu dia pas cikgu oli, aku dah tala alwap pun bertala terpuai di bala, aku bama aku ni awal. Kedunia apa, kesini kelapa, ulat dia buah. Dah awalnya, dah di pemimpin tu tahu mau berde, pemimpin tu lalu lah awak udah tiba kau lagi lah saya pada buah. Aku dah bershare baca bapa pemimpin dalam trend pasti ni apa, pasti wala Korea, pasti wala China, pasti wala Eropa. Aku dah di dah pemimpin tu dah pemimpin awak kata, pemimpin yang lain, pemimpin orang kata ni, kemana lu tak tahu pun Indonesia.
So his question is the first question is that in United States we do have some organization that they are willing to stand up for the correct cause. So the question is, it's against the U.S. law or not? Is legally or not? So that's one question. And another question is, do you have any suggestion for Korean people to move forward to, I would say, to fulfill the requirement to become a statehood? So that's the second question. And the third question is, so that if we recognize ourselves as a nation, is that legally or not legally, or is any against any law or not? Not really. So the question.
Well, the first question, no, there's nothing illegal or wrongful about Koran or anyone else advocating for independence. It's freedom of speech. We have another group in the United States called the American Israeli Political Action Committee. It's got 8 floors, office building near my building. It spends $120 million advocating for Israel. And it's not illegal. So this idea that somehow seeking independence is a crime is fanciful. It's not. You can be uninhibited in your advocacy for recognizing Katuli independent from Burma. I believe the second question was, how do you achieve recognition? A country is recognized basically upon the independent decisions of foreign countries. There's no law that compels a foreign country to recognize your state as a nation. Let me give you just one example, among many, maybe more than one example. Taiwan is now recognized only by 8 countries in the whole world, yet it operates as an independent country. We all know, de facto. Kosovo is an independent country, but it's only got like 2/3 of the countries of the world recognize it, because Russia does not want to recognize it. Kosovo, I mean, China doesn't, but that could change. A country can recognize and then withdraw recognition for whatever reason it wants. So there's no magic formula for how many nations have to recognize you in order to become so-called a nation that could then apply to the United Nations. As I say, Taiwan is not a member of the United Nations, yet Taiwan has much more freedom than the Karen people have in Katuli, right? And this is a political decision, not a decision of law. Countries aren't required under the law to recognize or not recognize any country at all. For decades, the United States refused to recognize Red China, the People's Republic of China. when it was obvious there's a billion people that are living under a separate government. We said, so what? We didn't want to recognize it for political purposes, and that changed with Nixon's opening in 1972. So that's not, the magic formula isn't necessarily how many countries recognize you, whether you in fact are operating separately and independently without being oppressed by another sovereign. Now, the interesting case is Somaliland. Somaliland is a portion of the Republic of Somalia. It doesn't have, at present, any recognition by any other country, maybe Ethiopia will. But it operates de facto as an independent state. It's not part of the UN, but they enjoy freedoms that the Somalians in the Republic of Somalia don't enjoy. Because as a practical matter, they don't have a terrorist there like Al-Shabaab. So when we think about statehood, it's more a political than a legal question. And how do you get political support? You go and tell countries, this is what we can do for you if you recognize us. It's all quid pro quo. Countries are not philanthropies, they're not charities, they're out there to serve their own interests. Now, what I believe the Karen can do at this time that's most constructive in moving towards independence is what I call, or others have called, capacity building for self-government. That is, training all age groups, all genders, the arts of self-government and politics, what you need to know, separation of powers, how does the rule of law work, how do you do oversight, how do you make sure that transparency rather than secrecy governs. And that's having, in an organized, systematic way, persons who are schooled in these arts, and I would place myself there, this is how you do it. Even taking observations, going to Congress, seeing a hearing, seeing people testify under oath, going to the U.S. Supreme Court, this is how an argument occurs, this is how decisions are made, so you can see it, in fact, how democratic dispensations operate. But I want to underscore, it is not easy. It takes a lot of intellectual investment, I call it intellectual infrastructure, to know how to do self-governance. Because it's not all logic, because the species has many irrational elements to it. You need to understand people skills, how to teach, how to disagree without being disagreeable, how not to disrespect anybody else's opinion. These aren't things that you can read out of a textbook. You just have to know this is how you get along with people. This is how you be a leader. This is how you're selfless. Don't talk about yourself. I often say the first thing if you want to be a leader and want to be effective is learn the art of speaking. You never begin a sentence with no. As soon as you begin a sentence with no, people's ears shut up. No. So you say it in a different way. You can be complimented. There may be additional views to look at things. But I say these seem to be trivial, but they're very important in having harmony in human relations because they can deteriorate very fast. And I say because the species is not rational, it's not like you can chart out AI. Oh, have an AI program, and it'll show you how to be a Democrat. Then AI programs like that don't exist. It takes human beings who understand the subtleties, if you will, the gradations between good and evil, and distinguish between gradations that are necessary. So that I believe that given the changing battlefield situation, which may have within months some specified territory which the Korean military has been able to pacify and can begin to implement, even if it's a pilot program, civilian administration. You need to prepare that kind of civilian training so you can show. We already have a mini constitution. We already show that we have the talent, if you will, to operate a civilian government with Democrats, and here are the people that we've trained. And you don't need to wait to train, because you can do training on the internet, over Zoom, whatever. All you got to do is study. It's labor intensive, because you got to do reading and thinking. Seeing how other countries have coped with this, including the United States, which I recommend is a wonderful model. But that's indispensable, because say otherwise, the risk is you'll be like these other Asian countries. Once they got independence, what happened? They became semi-dictatorships or complete ones immediately. And 50, 60, 70 years later, they're not making any progress towards freedom. Most recent example being in Thailand, where they still have this lèse-majesty law. I mean, the idea that you could make it a criminal offense to criticize the leader of a country, I mean, it's ridiculous. That's what citizenship is about, criticizing leaders if you don't think they're doing the right thing.
When they know that the quality come out of the all America, church, at the Mamata Global. That is the full now he can't color what the chief of all wire and one of the Homa the money to the big other Benin, to near the Natalia Tabu, Hokoyo, don't know that the chief order bid or be a chief concept for meanwhile, I live the only time of ordering chief order when the man do that Tapu of Tafra, the group of planet. Come on, if I do your poll of young, possibly don't be made a new one and the war or Fuga Tapa Tafra and man do that. Come on, man, not to wait for war to be war. Come on, I will meet that color, that will be the Sarah Kota, come on, order the Doba, no Howard Key, London Sarah, or the Tapu Tapa, Tapu Tapa, Tapu Party by all the other, meet clear color, that's a honor, and one man do Sigo, one day he do a common. That food what up and the food what I saw in power movie, that food what I tap on the bread, the dog chat movie, that food what up and the power, one movie, the that killer, Bamutan color, about the tap of transparency is a program, the Mama go through the Copa, Mama Program, Bala, Batting at 12, with that color of your Obama way, or he went to his Chico, learning Chico, the blue bean, Basana Kiro, Cobra Martin Funny. ถ้าผู้ประพาโรบาดอกในคิวจะมีเกล้าในเรือเป็นแหล่งใต้ที่เราวันหัวใต้ดินวันอย่างเราตานี่มีเกล้าในติดที่เชียที่ก่อนมีโอ้ดอกไอ้ดอกเดือดได้แค่เล่นหมาแค่เล่นของเบาดอกตาดอกตาตาผู้ประพาดอกตาตัวนี้สารพัดอยู่ในนอกจากตาผู้ประพาดอกวันและตาผู้ประพาเราวานที่ตาผู้ประพาไอ้ดอกเดือดเลยไม่ดูนี่ไอ้ดอกแล้วว่าเราก็น่าเราก็น่าเราบ้านเชิงจัดว่าเราจะบ้านผู้วันละเซตเอาไว้ไม่กำมันวันนี้ว่าเดี๋ยวอย่างเอาไว้เนี่ยตาป้าเป็นนอกตาที่ผ่านอยู่ประมาณนี้จะรู้เรื่องว่าป้าเป็นนอกมาเนี่ยมาที่นี่มาประมาณจะป้าเป็นนอกอะไรเนี่ยเสร็จมาวันการมาวันที่เราเนี่ยที่วันที่เราถ่ายว่านี่เสร็จมาเนี่ยมีคนสุดโต่งนี่ที่ข้อที่ป้าเนี่ยว่าจะป้าเป็นนอกเนี่ยเราเปิดแล้วนะพี่เนี่ยจะป้าเป็นนอกอะไรเนี่ยจะบุกว่าจะติดป้าเป็นนอกอะไรเอามาเดี๋ยวเราเอาบุตรไอ้เราเทสยาเนี่ยถ้าว่าใส่เนี่ยกูยังได้บางอย่างอยู่ไม่ได้บางอย่างพัดลมเรา